With Black Ops 6 being right around the corner, I am obviously very excited for the game, as I'm sure many of you are as well. That being said, there has been one consistent issue that has been plaguing Call of Duty Zombies ever since 2018 with Black Ops 4 that I don't believe I've seen anybody else talk about online or in any other videos. And no, it actually doesn't have anything to do with the gameplay or the game itself necessarily. So, let's talk about it. So ever since Black Ops 4 Zombies, there has been a consistent issue in every Call of Duty Zombies game, even in some of the non-Treyarch ones, and that being the fact that we have a very strong start to all of the games. Black Ops 4 Zombies literally launched with 4 maps: Voyage of Despair, 9, Classified, and Blood of the Dead. Then you look at Black Ops Cold War, which also had a pretty strong start. Now, there is a case to be made about that game literally only launching with 1 map, that being D Machine. Granted, if you were on PlayStation at launch, you also had access to Onslaught, which was like even more maps in a way if you kind of think about it. Sure, they weren't traditional round-based maps, but you were able to play zombies on a lot of the multiplayer maps, which definitely increased the amount of content that you had at launch just because of how many more maps you had access to play on. And then beyond that, once we start to talk about things like Vanguard Zombies, I feel like the conversation definitely gets a bit more controversial. For me personally, I did really enjoy Vanguard Zombies through and through, but you know, at that point, then there's a case to be made to be like, okay, maybe that one didn't have as strong of a start when it comes to sheer content in the game. But then the next game that had zombies, that being Modern Warfare 3, I mean, we've seen so far, like the game, when it first came out, there was tons of content to interact with, both with the main story missions and cool little side Easter eggs and all this other stuff to, you know, explore and discover in the open Warzone map. Despite the fact that, yes, some people may look at that and be like, well, you know what, that was just a Warzone map, they recycled it, it really wasn't original Zombies content. On the other hand, they added so much to it and transformed it so much. I can't believe I actually just went down around 3. I'm playing keyboard and mouse. Anybody that's been watching the channel for any substantial amount of time knows I cannot play on keyboard and mouse to save my life. However, there has been a running theme with all of these Zombies games. As I had mentioned, they all start pretty strong for the most part across the board. But then there's one issue that occurs usually midway, if not in the last quarter of each game's life cycle, and that is the fact that every Zombies game since Black Ops 4 has had a very strong drop-off. Now, am I saying that the last half of all of these Zombies games have been absolutely terrible, abhorrent, absolute trash, get this out of my face, 1 out of 10 IGN, terrible gaming experiences? No, of course not. However, there's been an undeniable drop-off, not even necessarily just in the quality of the maps, because I feel like for the most part, the maps have at least still been somewhat quality, but there's definitely a clear drop-off in the budget or just amount of people that are actually working on these games, because we even know just from developers talking about what goes on behind the scenes at Treyarch or Sledgehammer or, you know, just any of the other Activision studios that are working on Zombies, that yeah, in the latter half of these games, it's basically a skeleton crew working on the Zombies by the end of it. Again, you look at Black Ops 4, we literally launched with 4 Zombies maps. The first 2 DLCs were very strong with Dead of the Night and Ancient Evil, and as much as I love Alpha Omega and Tag der Toten in those games, it's hard to deny the fact that, yes, it's clear that not as big of a budget was allocated to those last 2 maps, considering the fact that, well, you know, they were capping off the Aether storyline, and the 2 maps to cap off the Aether storyline were just remakes of Nuketown and Call of the Dead. Now, granted, I was, you know, hoping that we'd see remakes of those maps again. I mean, the only time that we had Nuketown Zombies in the past was obviously in Black Ops 2 Zombies, and as great as that was, it would have been great to see a remake of it, and we got it there, and it was not even just a remake, but rather a reimagining in Alpha Omega, which was really cool. And then Tag der Toten, it was definitely more of a faithful remake with a few new things added, similar to Blood of the Dead, where most of the map was intact, but they added some things onto it, changed some things up, obviously got rid of, you know, the George Romero boss. Rest in peace, by the way, George Romero, an absolute legend. But to cap off a decade-long storyline that we had there with the Ultimus and Primus cast, yeah, you know, it kind of would, and again, not even considering the fact that we didn't even get to play as Primus or Ultimus in that final map, which, you know, it really means that their final map to be featured in would have been Alpha Omega, which is like really like, you know, as great as that map is, I don't know, when I think of like an epic send-off, especially for something that's been running for a decade, something like Revelations or like the map we're playing right now, Origins, I feel like really would have been the way to do it. And again, it's not even saying that Tag der Toten isn't a quality map, because it actually is a quality map. It's genuinely like a great map. It's a lot of fun to play. That being said, the biggest sticking point for me is just the fact that, yes, it's clear that there was less of a budget put into it, and not only that, the fact that you're not even playing as the original cast in that map. But anyway, then we move on to the next game that would have had zombies, that being Black Ops Cold War, where I would say overall, looking at Black Ops Cold War as a complete package, there is a lot of content there, if not the most content that we've ever seen in a zombies game, between the various modes that we have access to and just the sheer amount of maps you can play on, right? Like, if you count up all the Onslaught maps, I mean, it's essentially every single multiplayer map in the game, and there's a lot of multiplayer maps in Black Ops Cold War. There might be a few that weren't added to Onslaught specifically, whether that be specific variations of the maps or just maps in general, but I mean, for the most part, any map that you can play in multiplayer, you can play in Onslaught. Not to mention then Outbreak, which also consists of multiple maps, which you know, if you just want to count Outbreak as like one map or one game mode, that's totally fair, because part of the allure of the game mode is that you're just kind of shifting between maps, you know, repeatedly, round after round. So there's that. And then we had Dead Ops Arcade 3, which we hadn't seen Dead Ops Arcade since Black Ops 3. It seems like every other Black Ops game we get Dead Ops Arcade, so we may or may not get it in Black Ops 6. I'm not counting on it, because Black Ops 1, we had Dead Ops Arcade 1. Black Ops 3, we had Dead Ops Arcade 2. Cold War, we had Dead Ops Arcade 3. So, unfortunately, we probably won't see that this year, but who knows, we might. And then outside of those two modes that we had just discussed, then obviously we had 4 round-based maps. Those being D Machine, Firebase Z, Mauer de Toten, and Forsaken. And as much as I love every single map in Black Ops Cold War, both the main round-based maps and the ones that weren't round-based maps, it's very clear that towards the end of the game's life cycle, there was definitely some budgetary cuts or just something that happened behind the scenes, because the maps were only getting bigger and grander and there was more being added to them. And by the time that we got to Forsaken, you know, for all the other maps in the game, right? Like, all of them were technically kind of just ripped from the campaign, similar to what we saw back in the day with, like, Black Ops 1 and especially World of War, where they would oh, no, I held the grenade for too long. What was I doing? I was counting the ticks, but I was too focused on talking that I lost count. But it got to a point during Black Ops Cold War's life cycle where, like, yes, they were doing the same thing they did back in the day, and it was still working in Black Ops Cold War, right? Like, you know, even though the stuff that we're playing in Firebase Z and Mauer de Toten was technically ripped from the campaign, you couldn't even tell that it was ripped from the campaign because of how transformative it was. However, by the time that we got to Forsaken, it was very clear that they were just stitching together what they could to get the final map out the door. Like, all of the focus on that map and the budget and everything like that clearly went into the Easter egg and that final boss fight, because let me tell you, I mean, that final boss fight, it's grand, it's epic, it's amazing. But when you look at the rest of the map, like, yes, it's still a cohesive zombies experience. Yes, there's a lot of awesome things to interact with and play between the main Easter egg, the side Easter eggs, the wonder weapons in the map. It's genuinely a lot of fun to play. However, at the same time, again, it doesn't feel as cohesive or as, I don't know, unified of an experience as we saw with literally any of the other maps that came previously before that in the year. It's one of those things where it's really hard to explain what I mean, but when you play the map, you know what I mean, right? It's one of those gameplay feel things. I think most of it really does just come down to the fact that, you know, the map is just kind of stitched together with teleporters. I feel like anytime that you have a map like that where it's just stitched together with, like, fast travel or teleporters, kind of similar to, like, Revelations, for example, it's like, alright, you can kind of tell that there was either budgetary constrictions or time restrictions here. And funnily enough, the reason that they were not able to put all of their budget or time into the ending of Black Ops Cold War, or at least, you know, constructing the final map to make it feel a bit more cohesive, is because they were pulled off to go work on Vanguard Zombies. And obviously, splitting an already tight budget and skeleton-esque crew to work on not just one game, which, you know, they barely just had enough resources and manpower to get that final map out the door and make it a complete experience. But then they took that manpower and divided it into 2, essentially, to start working on Vanguard Zombies, and we all know how that worked out. Again, I'm not dissing Vanguard Zombies, because I do love that game. But, you know, only having Duran Fong at launch, and then Terra Maledicta a few months after that, and then months of silence until the latter half of the game's life cycle, where we finally got a remake of Shinonuma, before going to the Archon, which was a rehash of Terra Maledicta, except the skybox was a different color. And, you know, the map in itself, it obviously wasn't designed with, like, ground-based zombies in mind. The Easter egg, again, similar to Forsaken, was amazing in that map. Like, you know, for the maps like that where they prioritize the Easter egg and they just worry about getting you a sick boss fight, I mean, they hit it out of the park, of course. But it is one of those situations where you have to wonder, like, if Treyarch had more time and a bigger budget to work with, how much better could Vanguard Zombies have turned out in terms of just cohesive maps? Because as much as I love that game, yeah, it's hard to deny that with a bigger budget and more manpower, we could have ended up with a, you know, grander or more cohesive experience, especially when it comes to something like the Archon, you know, that's supposed to cap off the entire game. Like, really rehashing Terra Maledicta, a map from earlier in the year that you transform from that Outbreak type mode into just being around. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of you gotta call it out for what it is. And then the final example, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, the most recent entry in the Call of Duty Zombies, I don't know what you want to call it, just the latest game with Call of Duty Zombies, the latest one in the timeline. The game came out, it had a great amount of content. We had 3 acts of story missions to go through, beautiful cutscenes, an epic boss fight to cap everything off, on top of a ton of Easter eggs littered throughout the map. So even though, yes, it was technically a rehash or recycle or whatever you want to call it of the Warzone 3 map, Urzikstan, it was transformed to such an extent between the skyboxes and the actual environments themselves and the Easter eggs and all these other things inside of the map to where I feel like it really didn't matter because it didn't even really feel like a Warzone map, at least not for me personally. Like, it really did just feel like a new Zombies experience. And while, yes, it was technically just the Warzone map, it was still complete enough on its own merits where I was like, okay, you know what, like, that's not even an issue. But guess what happened? They had this great foundation, which for some players was already shaky because of the recycling of assets, and not even midway through the game's life cycle, they just pulled support. Like, that was it. We're still getting skeletal updates up until the game, until the game's over, until Black Ops 6 releases. We do have one final story mission coming out with Season 5 Reloaded, which will be coming out roughly a week after this video goes up, just to date this video a little bit. And while, yes, it's cool that we're getting that final story mission, here's the thing. We got 3 acts of story missions at launch, and ever since launch, we've gotten 2 story missions. So, across the 5 seasons of content, yes, we have had other things added to, or maybe it's, actually, no, I might have been wrong about that. I think it might have been 3 missions, whatever. We might have had 2 or 3 since launch, and we're getting another one before the game ends, which means in total, we're looking at, like, what? 3 or 4 extra missions, and in total, that's only like 1 extra act to the storyline. Again, when we got 3 at launch, and mind you, it maybe takes 30 minutes tops to complete these story missions that they've added a piece, which means we've had an additional 2 hours, maybe like 3 or 4 at absolute most if you're a bit of a slower player, of additional story content to play through, which is like nothing in comparison to the sheer amount that we had at launch. And while, yes, I know it goes beyond the story missions, right? Like, when you look at all the other content that they've added between the Dark Aether being a whole new playable space and the different Dark Aether rifts, and how they've essentially added, like, not only endgame content, but then post-endgame content with even harder rifts, harder ball, all this other stuff to go for, right? Like, it's cool. They've done a decent amount in terms of adding replayability, new schematics, new things to go for. Get off of me, Panzer. It's hard to deny that somewhere in the pipeline, once again, we had an amazing mode that was stripped down behind the scenes to a bare skeleton crew with minimum budget. And while yes, they were still giving us really fun and engaging and replayable content to play through, it's just, it's not, you know, what you would expect post-launch in a Zombies game, especially when you look back at something like Black Ops 3, where not only did we get the main season plus Zombies Chronicles, which was like year 2 content. I'm not expecting year 2 content out of every Call of Duty by any means. Of course not. We only ever had that one time before, so it would be completely idiotic of me to expect that from other Call of Duty games just because one did that before, that being Black Ops 3 right here. That being said, at the very least, I do expect games to just be completed through their season. Like, you know, I don't need all the year 2 content, but if you could at least complete the game you're working on before focusing on working on the next when you still have one that needs to be completed, that would be very appreciated. Because again, as fun as the content is in Modern Warfare 3 that they've added since launch, it definitely has been quite skeletal, and I've said this in many of my Modern Warfare 3 videos to where I'm still playing the multiplayer and I'm still playing Warzone in Modern Warfare 3, and occasionally I even do play Zombies, you know, whenever they add new weapons to the game to go and grind out, like new camos and stuff like that, or, you know, just whenever multiplayer is getting to me a bit with the sweats and I just want to go relax, do some contracts, and just kind of chill out on Zombies for a bit with no real goal. I mean, I can still do that, and I can still have fun in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, of course, just as I can with any other Zombies mode, because at its core fundamental gameplay level, Call of Duty Zombies, no matter what iteration we're talking about, is still fun to just hop in and shoot zombies and play the game. That being said, from a content front, and in terms of support, once again, they kind of took the mode out back, and, you know, I mean, I don't even need to finish the saying right there, you know what I'm saying, even just by the time that Season 3 Reloaded, they already took the mode out back, and that was that. And I think the problem really does come down to not only are they not expending enough of the budget that they put into these games, because we already know a lot of budget already goes into making a Call of Duty game with the marketing and this, that, and the other, but obviously they already have so much money to expend with microtransactions and all that. literally just throw the zombies team at least another 100 grand or at least a couple K. Like, dog, just throw like another 50K their way. I'm sure that would at least go a long way. Anything more than what they're getting now, because I swear, especially when you look at something like Vanguard Zombies, I swear the Archon must have had like maybe a 2K budget at most. Like, and most of that 2K was probably just to pay the employees enough to get through a couple days of work to make the map, and that was that. I don't want to talk about it. I tried to check my recording for 1 second, and I thought I paused the game, but I didn't. So I was sitting here spamming 2, trying to use my in plain sight, but it wasn't working. You can hear me spamming the key still. I was spamming that same key, and it just never went off. That's fine. I'm almost getting to the end of my discussion now. Most of this video has just kind of been recapping everything up to this point, just to back up what I said at the beginning of this video, so then everybody realizes I'm not just being dramatic about this, and there is genuine substance to the point that I'm trying to make here. But anyways, that covers everything up to Modern Warfare 3 at this point, so now you kind of know my feelings and all that, and just kind of like a general rehash of where Call of Duty Zombies has been in the last couple years, between the fact that yes, they launch in really fun states, yes, the content that they add is still fun to play, but ultimately it's clear that budget cuts are made every single time and has been happening every single game since Black Ops 4, not only budgetary cuts, but also people just getting yanked off of the projects, either just to go work on Warzone or just to work on the next Zombies game in general. So my biggest concern for the moment is that the same thing is going to happen to Black Ops 6. We have a very promising start, and for every Call of Duty Zombies game that has had a promising start in recent years, especially something like Black Ops 4, where you look at it, it's like, oh, 4 Zombies maps at launch, it's very possible that midway through the year they just start to yank the plug, because some people have this misunderstanding that, oh, they develop this stuff while the game is being developed and then they ship it out, and, you know, just at some point through the year we'll get the content they've been working on. But more times than not, there's actually a lot of times where they're working on this stuff as we're getting it. So if you look at Sheen and Newman back in Vanguard, they even made posts saying that, hey, we're just now beginning the development on this map, so you'll receive it in a couple of months when it's done. So while yes, they do start working on some of the stuff before the game releases, obviously, because you want to have that stuff mapped out and have your general content schedule mapped out, more times than not, a lot of this content actually isn't finished even by the time the game goes out, and there's still a lot that they have to work on. Is that the case for every piece of content we get? No, of course not. Of course, there's some things that are made and just kind of held on to, but there is some substantial pieces of content that are just kind of held on to. And one thing worth mentioning, right, is that Black Ops 6, I'm sorry, has had the longest development cycle that a Call of Duty game has ever been allowed, that being a full 4 years. It has been 4 years since Black Ops Cold War, and while yes, the entire Treyarch Zombies team was not able to work on Zombies and Black Ops 6 specifically since 2020, because not only did they have to finish up Cold War, which took into 2021, but they were also pulled off to work on Vanguard until 2022, as we had talked about, and then after that, sometime in 2022 to 2023, they had to go work on Modern Warfare Zombies, which, of course, they were still working on up until partway through Modern Warfare 3, until Sledgehammer took over midway through the year when Activision decided to take the mode out back, and then, yeah, Sledgehammer's just kind of finishing up the content that we're going to be receiving here with Season 5 Reloaded, which we can also assume means that we're not going to be receiving any content in Season 6 for Zombies, which is also pretty worrisome, because not only are we in a situation where we're getting our final mission in Season 5 Reloaded, but if that's going to be your final mission, then what does that mean for Season 6? Is Modern Warfare Zombies literally just going to be dead in Season 5 before the game is even over? I mean, Cold War even lasted longer than that, even though that game only had four round-based maps, you know, not to mention all the other content that game got. At least there was still Onslaught stuff that was added. So we have 2 maps coming out at launch of Black Ops 6, those being Terminus and Liberty Falls. And from there, it's really, we're just going to have to see how things go. My hope is that we can just get a traditional, you know, like season of content of Zombies like we would have gotten back in literally any other Call of Duty Zombies game, like Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, where you have the 4 DLC packs that come out at some point throughout the seasons. I don't care what the release timing is, as long as we can get at least like 4 round-based maps, 4 round-based maps after launch, so a total of somewhere between 5 to 6 round-based maps in total. I feel like that would be an appropriate amount, you know. 4 round-based maps in Cold War totally worked, but I don't know. I just feel like now that we've had so many games with more maps and stuff like that, I just feel like if they could really put the budget and the time in to give us just a few more maps, it would really be nice. Again, I'm not the one developing the game, so it's not my say to be like, hey, we need this amount of content or we need that amount of content. Like, again, I'm not developing a game. That's not my place. I'm just saying what I would personally like to see, and furthermore, what the community as a whole would probably like to see. And I feel like another point worth making is that even if we do only say get something like Black Ops Cold War, where by the end of the year we get, say, maybe like 4 or 5 round-based maps, I'm fine with that. I would rather have 4 or 5 like triple S tier, knock it out of the park, amazing maps, rather than 6 maps where the last 2 get, you know, just absolutely squandered by restricted manpower or limited budgets, to where they just feel like incomplete or incohesive experiences. So that's another thing worth mentioning. Always go for quality over quantity, but that's just kind of where I'm at. That's where my headspace is, and that is currently my biggest and really only concern about Black Ops 6. I don't know what the general consensus is on Black Ops 6 right now, just because you guys know me, I don't use social media, I don't even watch YouTube anymore. It's just, it's not good for me to be on the internet. It's just too much toxicity, too much negativity out there. It's just not for me anymore to be on the internet. That being said, from everything that I've seen, I am very excited for Black Ops 6 Zombies. Everything between the maps themselves, the gameplay, the story, everything does look really great. This is just my biggest concern at the moment. I don't need Black Ops 3 levels of content because I feel like that would just be unreasonable to ask for because of how much support that this game got. It was absolutely insane. But what I am asking for is if, you know, because we are paying the money for this game, I just feel like if we could at least get a, you know, substantial amount of content to where, you know, it feels like they're constantly at least supporting the mode, at least trying to give something back to the players. You know, I just feel like that would be nice at the very least, and hopefully it doesn't become apparent towards the latter half of the year that the same thing that has happened to every single game since Black Ops 4 Zombies, in terms of zombies at the very least, happens to Black Ops 6. I really hope that doesn't happen, but we'll just have to see how things go. I'm crossing my fingers and I'm hoping for the best. I just want the developers to be able to make the game that they want to make and not have any of that potential squandered by the publishers or higher ups just because they need to move them on to another money-making project. Because at the end of the day, while sure it stinks for the players when things like what have happened since every game since Black Ops 4 happens, really, it's not just the players that it affects. I feel like and if anything, it's probably the most heartbreaking for the developers that are really trying to pour their hearts and souls into these games, but are simply just told no. Because at the end of the day, video games are art, and artists should be allowed to work on their art until they feel it is truly complete, you know, without any meddlings from the outside. But anyway, that's my thoughts on all of this, and that is really my only and biggest concern for Black Ops 6 at the moment. So we'll see how all of this pans out. I apologize if this video felt a little long or rambly in the tooth. I was also trying to play a game of Origins at the same time, and that in itself takes a good bit of brain power just to micromanage all the different tasks you have to do as you're playing through the map. Might have been a better idea for me to play the Giant or something like that, so I could have focused on what I was saying a bit more, but regardless, I feel like you guys got the gist of it. So, yeah, do you guys think I'm onto something? Do you think I'm entirely wrong? Or, you know, I mean, I don't know. What are you hoping for with Black Ops 6? Do you have any concerns about the game? Just whatever it is, whatever you're thinking. I'd love to get that conversation going with you guys. But anyway, as always, my shout out to on the Patreons and to the members taking on the low ball tier, and shout out to on the big ball tier. My last game is animated bitch that's on G tier run events. So much as thank you guys so much, guys. So little legends, I love you. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.